I was thinking that I would be back on Wednesday, the 29th, but it looks like it will be at least another day, Thursday the 30th, before I come back. Therefore, today we're going to talk about chapters 1 and 6, What is Debate, because I'm thinking that probably you're going to be finishing up your current event speeches Monday or Tuesday and be introduced to the fast food debates on Tuesday. So then on Wednesday, we're going to kind of talk about this chapter 1 through 6, what is the debate, or else Tuesday you're going to do that. And then Wednesday, you're going to be going over the fast food debates. So that means that we need to talk about debate and what debate is. So over the weekend, hopefully you read chapters 1 and chapter 6 in your basic debate textbook. And today in class, you're going to be watching this video on kind of introducing what the debate is. Then you're going to take a little bit of time and you're going to talk about these questions from chapter 1 and chapter 6. When that's done, I want you to come back to the screencasting video and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the vocabulary that you need to know in order to discuss debates. So pause the video right now. Go ahead and play that YouTube video and also talk about the chapter 1 and chapter 6 questions in class, and then come back to this so that we can discuss vocabulary. Okay, so vocabulary terms for the debate. There are a bunch that you need to know, but I put the most important ones up on the screen. And this is something you definitely want to write down somewhere in a notebook or keep track of somewhere. Type it on your Chromebook so that you can remember it as you're working on building up your debate, and you're going to start to use these in class immediately. So remembering which one is which is really important. So the first term that we're going to talk about is the term resolution. So the resolution is the topic or argument that is under consideration in the debate. So let's say for your fast food debates, which you're going to be beginning soon, you are going to be resolved that one fast food restaurant is better than another. Or if you were in a policy debate, you would say resolved that the United States was right in pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord. Okay? Or resolved that the United States should not pull out of the Paris Climate Accord. So it's whatever the argument is and whatever side you're taking in that argument. That's the resolution statement. Resolution, resolved. To be resolved about something means that you are determined that something should take place. Okay, so the next vocabulary term is constructive. And this is the paper that you'll be writing. Every debate will have a constructive. And it is a prepared speech that is basically the argumentative case that is built by each side. And it's usually the first round in a debate. In most debates, the affirmative side, that's the side that's arguing in favor of the resolution, will go first and present their constructive and then be cross-examined by the negative side. And then the negative side will present their constructive and be cross-examined by the affirmative side when that's done. So the constructive is always prepared in advance, and it includes all of the different parts of the argument that you're making. Contentions, these are arguments that help reinforce the constructive. So when you think about writing, let's say, just say a 5-paragraph essay, you have an introduction, you have 3 main ideas, and then you have a conclusion, right? Contentions are the main ideas. So whatever the argument is, if, for example, you're arguing in favor of the United States remaining in the Paris Climate Accord, your contentions or main arguments would be your reasons why they should remain, and that's always supported by valid evidence. So moving on to evidence. Evidence, there are different types of evidence. Scientific evidence is evidence that is proved by scientific studies or by scientific discoveries. Statistical evidence kind of comes from scientific evidence. If there's a study that's been done and it's found that 79% of Americans believe that the United States should remain in the Paris Climate Accord, that's considered statistical evidence. Those two are very strong points of evidence as long as the source that you're getting it from is a non-biased source. So you have to pay attention to that. Historical evidence, you can use examples from history to kind of show what has happened in the past and the effects of what has happened in the past. That's pretty strong evidence as well. Analogical and anecdotal evidence are the two probably weakest forms of evidence in debate, but they can still be used. Analogical evidence is where you compare one thing to another through analogy. So if I were to compare pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord to like removing ourselves from the world and becoming isolationist, I'm making an analogy between isolationist theory and pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord. And so that evidence, isn't necessarily supported by any kind of scientific or statistical evidence, but it is creating a comparison. So analogical evidence creates a comparison. And then anecdotal evidence is where you tell a story. It's the weakest form of evidence because it's basically based only on emotion. However, you can use anecdotal evidence, and a lot of times debaters use it very well in introductions and conclusions in order to pull on the heartstrings of the audience and the judges. But I wouldn't use it to back up your contentions or as the only evidence backing up your contentions. All right, the next term, signposting. Signposting, and I think your book uses a different term, road marking or something like that. And I don't remember exactly what it is. But anyway, signposting is when you use clear phrases to transition from one contention to another. So, for example, in debate, it's very clear, it's very frequent to hear, my first contention is, my second contention is, my third contention is, in conclusion, as transitions. Those are excellent signposts, and in debate it's really necessary, whereas in writing people will look down on it a little bit more, like saying my first main idea, my second main idea, my third main idea. But in debate it's very necessary to do signposting because the judge may not hear everything that you have to say if you don't signpost, and then they'll think that you don't have a very strong case. So signposting, something you want to do. Cross-examination is when one side asks questions of the other side, and they do this for a couple of different reasons. One, sometimes they just need further information. When you're in a debate and you're trying to listen to the other side and taking a flow and keeping notes and everything like that, you may not catch everything the other side is saying. So sometimes in cross-examination, one side will actually ask, could you please repeat your second contention? And that way, you know what the different arguments that are being made by each side are, and you don't have to guess about them. So sometimes it's just to simply get information, but most of the time it's used to reveal flaws in the argument or in the evidence that's presented in the constructive. So that's why it's really important to listen closely when your opponent is presenting their constructive, so you know what to ask questions of, what the weaknesses are, and how to expose the weaknesses through cross-examination. The next round of debate is called the rebuttal. The rebuttal is where each side gets an opportunity to stand up and defend anything that happened in the cross-examination and to strengthen their own argument. So rebuttals are that important last step right before you conclude the debate to kind of make sure that your case is strong once again. All right, flow. The flow is the term we give for the notes that you take during a debate. Sometimes it's referred to as taking a flow, and that's keeping the notes to make sure that that you're understanding all of the different contentions and the evidence presented by the opposing side. It is extremely important because you're not allowed to use any kind of recording devices or digital devices, so you have to be able to, by hand, write down the notes, and I'll show you different flow documents that you can use to kind of help you organize those. All right, next one, dropped argument. So when your opponent brings up a contention and you do not attack it, or when you bring up a contention and there's not a question or an attack made about that argument, then that is called a dropped argument. And whichever team drops an argument loses basically a point from the judge. If you are the person who wants to point out that the other side dropped an argument, that's good for you. You bring it up. You say, my second contention is a dropped argument by the opponents because they did not attack it accurately or correctly or something along those lines. And that's very helpful for the judge. All right, next one, conceding arguments. So let's say the opponent has an argument that you actually agree with, or you agree with part of it. Then you concede that argument. So you would say something along the lines of, in reference to my opponent's second contention, I concede that it is possible that there are better ways of approaching climate change than through the Paris Climate Accord. Okay, but that sometimes conceding arguments should be followed by a but. You concede this part, but you want to attack this other part of the contention. All right, and then last, something that was brought up in the video that you watched is burden of rejoinder. That's something that's present in all debates that are not presidential or political debates. And the burden of rejoinder simply means that if someone brings up a contention, you have to reply to or attack that contention or say something about that contention, even if it's just conceding that contention in some way. Otherwise, it's considered a dropped argument and you could lose the round. Okay, so those are the vocabulary terms that you kind of need to keep in mind, and that introduction to the debate. Tomorrow, hopefully, or Thursday, whatever day this is, we'll be back in class, and I'm hoping I will be there, and we will structure the debate, and we'll talk a little bit how you're going to be doing that for the fast food debate. And this is going to be a team debate, and it looks like we're going to only have 4 teams this semester because the class is a little bit smaller. Usually I go with 6 teams because I usually have a class of about 30 kids, but this is a smaller class, so I think we're going to have 4 teams. All right, and I will put those teams together. All right, thank you very much. Hope you have a great day, and hopefully I will see you on Thursday.